Is something wrong with Jordan Peterson? There could be. What we're gonna hear right now are thoughts by Gabor Mate, another Canadian, just like Jordan Peterson, who is a specialist in trauma and addiction. He's actually based out here in my city in Vancouver, Canada, so it's cool to see content from him. These are his thoughts on Jordan Peterson. Before we do that though, please go down, click like and subscribe. Please leave a comment if you have any thoughts on this video. I'm gonna reply to you. I'd love to have a really high quality, really real discussion. Do that right now and let's get going.
And you're from Canada.
Yeah.
One of the biggest phenomenon of the last couple of years has been Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
What have you made of him, his rise, and what it says about the culture that people are so thirsting for what he's talking about?
Peterson, first he was very bright, extraordinarily articulate, and in some ways a compelling speaker. So he's an attractive figure in some ways. When I read him, I sense a lot of suppressed rage in him. In fact, I think his voice is choking with rage a lot of the time. It's interesting because he talks about rage, that you have to deal with it. I don't think he understands just how angry he is. And if you look at his websites, the comments are full of rage by his young acolytes.
Are his comments full of rage? I've been in the comments of his videos and the political stuff definitely has some anger there. But I don't know, I think his biblical series, his self-development content is just full of supportive comments, people helping each other, calls for help, people sharing stories, wisdom, insight, talking about how much Jordan Peterson has improved their life. I don't know about the rage. I definitely can see that happening in the comments under the more political discussion because that's such a hot topic right now in society that's gonna get people really heated. So I can understand that. Him having suppressed rage, he definitely has a bit of a temper. He said that one of the things that could be improved by him was his temper. Now that said, maybe what Gabor Mate saw were the moments where he's really being provoked. He's under attack in a live setting on TV, on the news, in interviews, in debates by bad faith actors who are doing their best to make it hard for him to reply authentically. In those circumstances, most people would blow up way harder than he has. In fact, most of his most intense moments, they aren't even really that angry. Now, whether or not it's suppressed, that's another thing. What do you guys think?
Now that's an energetic thing. That it's his energy that draws people as much as what he actually teaches. Secondly, he teaches repression. I mean, he very rightly takes an issue where somebody mandates a certain kind of language, and he very rightly and righteously says that I will not be dictated to about what language I'm going to use. Well, good for him. I'm all in favor of not mandating language, on the one hand. On the other hand, he basically advocates repression. In his book, he talks about how an angry 2-year-old child needs to be sit by themselves until they get over it. Rather than understanding why a child would be angry at age 2, what frustrations they're having, and what human contact they need to help them move through that anger, he says repress the anger. So he's all about repressed anger as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, there are two things going on there. The first thing, he's all about repressed anger. I don't think he's all about repressed anger. I think he's about harnessing those kind of things. He talks about being dangerous, being competent, having your sword but keeping it sheathed, being the kind of person who's capable of, and knowing that you're capable of doing bad things but choosing to do good things anyway. I don't know if that has to do with, I don't know if there's very much repression in that. Maybe in this one example it's about repression. I wouldn't say that Jordan Peterson is about repression in general. Now, on that comment, that's actually very, very interesting. There's another critique of Jordan Peterson that I might do a reaction to someday, actually, that is valid by my understanding. He says it was in that same rule in 12 Rules for Life. It was that don't let your children be someone you dislike. And the problem there is, it's not the responsibility of the kid to be someone that you like. It's your responsibility as an adult to raise your kid in a way and act around your kid in a way where they're likable. It's up to you to do that. You don't punish them. It's not their fault. And this weird dynamic of him with this advice for like early children around, if they're, maybe he said that in the book. I actually haven't read that chapter. So, okay, put the kid in a corner until they're done being angry. I don't know if that was in the book. If it was, that's exactly the area where he's been criticized before, rightly so. So the suggestion wasn't that he's just a man about repression or that he has anger issues, but the suggestion was that maybe even Jordan Peterson has some unresolved trauma from his childhood that is coming out in some of these ideas of his. Certainly, there's a lot of suffering going on in his world, that he's incorporated suffering so much into his sense of meaning. It's like, bear your cross nobly. That's a core aspect of how he sees life, right? So he's definitely someone who's helped a lot of people. The fact that he needs some work himself, almost guaranteed everyone does. That's not a sign that he's not suitable to help other people. It's just a sign that there might be something there that's unaddressed. And I think there might be something to that.
And it's very interesting how he talks about children. He talks about little varmints and little monsters and so on. I know that's meant to be humorous, but it's also a certain way of thinking of the young human child. So fundamentally, I see him as an agent of repression. He posing as an agent of libertarianism. Not to mention, he's got this bee in his bonnet about what he seems to consider to be conspiracies by left-wing intellectuals. They seem to be his bête noire. Being a left-wing intellectual myself, I like to talk to him sometimes. What are you so upset about, Jordan? What are you so afraid of? He talks about these bloody Marxists. And he points out very accurately all the horror that occurred under so-called Marxist regimes, particularly in the Soviet Union. He's absolutely...
So-called Marxist regimes. That's a bit of a red flag there. If you're distancing the Soviet Union and historical communist states from their own self-proclaimed origins. But anyway, that's a discussion for another thing. It's funny, you see how he identified himself as a left-wing academic? I forget what the word was. It's like, yeah, that's erring on the side of the, identitarian politics.
Really accurate about that. But then he promotes Christianity. Shall I tell him about the mass murders that occurred in the name of Christianity? Should I tell him about all the millions that were slaughtered in the names of the gentle Jesus?
Fair enough.
In other words, let's be fair about it.
See, let's be fair about it. Sounds like it's an us versus them thing. That's kind of the result of that like polarized political thinking. Now it's true, like his version of Christianity, by the way, is super, super heretical. Seeing the life of Jesus as a story, Christians don't believe that the life of Jesus was a story. They believe that it captures the pattern of reality and the cosmos. It's not just a story to guide yourself in life like Jordan Peterson sees it. They think it's way more than that. They would see Jordan Peterson and be like, okay, man, that's cool. Hopefully we get some conversions from you, but what you're saying is not acceptable. So he's definitely not promoting the church necessarily.
He seems to pick ideologies to attack and abhor and embrace other ideologies that are just as murderous in practice sometimes. It's a much more interesting question for me. What happened in Eastern Europe? How come under an ideology that was meant to liberate people, so many people were oppressed? I come from Eastern Europe. I was born in Hungary. He doesn't have to tell me about what it was like. But how about asking, how come a religious philosophy that was meant to promote love and acceptance and compassion has become such an agent of 2 millennia of repression, oppression, and killing? So can we be objective, or we're going to be simply tribal about it? I have a lot to say to Jordan, or as much as I appreciate actually some of what he says, and as interesting as I find him, I think he's a very mixed figure, largely an agent of repression.
You notice how we switched from fundamentally an agent of repression to largely an agent of repression there? Maybe he misspoke, fair enough. But it does seem like the idea of him being this repression person is very important for him. You kind of see the inklings of Gabor Mate as being the sort of left-wing intellectual, although I really, really respect him and love the work that he's done in trauma and addiction. I'm not going to say that he needs to stay in his lane. People say that about Jordan Peterson. I think intellectuals especially people who have specialized and expanded their knowledge out, that they can add a lot in a lot of different areas. So I'm glad to hear his thoughts. What I'm hearing is part of the discussion points that come from that sort of polarized identitarian political thinking. It's like, what about Christianity? He did say he's open to asking questions about how the ideology of Marxism led to, which was supposed to free people, led to repression. He said he's open to that question. Jordan Peterson has dived into that. In fact, a large part of the book, Maps of Meaning, his first book, was devoted largely to just exploring the questions of why people would do horrible things in the name of their beliefs, and why that happened so much in the 20th century. So it sounds like they'd actually have a pretty interesting discussion. I think Gabor Mate would have some of his kind of like political thinking rattled a bit, and Jordan Peterson would have to clarify his views around the difference between, reading and interpreting the biblical series and then the church itself, and that would be very valuable for people to hear, I think. So thank you very much. Please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear what you think. I'm going to reply to you. We're going to have awesome discussion back and forth. That's my promise to you. Please click like and subscribe and help this channel grow. It's going to go really far. I'm taking this really far, and you can be part of the original people who subscribed before it blew up. So thank you very much. I'll see you in the comments. Thank you very much.